Ooh, welcome into the Gambling Gauchos. I'm Rob Bro. He's Kyle Jacobson. Big 12 Media Days happened this week. We'll talk about it. We're coming to you live from the Stretch Lab studios. Don't just stretch, get stretched. Now in Lubbock. I'll tell you more about them as the season goes along. The preseason, certainly. I would say, Kyle, that the Big 12 Media Days is the signifier that the offseason is over and the preseason has started, though some would contend that it's exactly a month before the first game because that's when actual practice starts. So whatever your contention is, if it's the middle of July or the 1st of August, preseason is upon us. We'll be in high school two-a-days soon, cracking pads and otherwise. On the Payne, Pal, Truett, and Chandler rundown today, we've got some quotes from around the Big 12 coaches. I've got some thoughts on the Texas Tech players. I don't really pay attention to too many other players. I did get to speak to Sam Levitt at Big 12 Media Days. And we will take you through our Gambling Gauchos Big 12 preseason poll. They didn't want you to see it. We're going to show it to you. You know, if I say that sentence out of context, I might need to talk to Payne, Pal, Truett, and Chandler. Kyle, how are you?
Doing good, Rob.
Happy to be talking to you. I'm gonna start reading some quotes, and I think you'll have reactions on a bunch of these. We'll start with the day one guys, and obviously, if we're going to start with day one, we might as well start with the Joey Maguire quote. Joey Maguire on the Big 12. I think this conference is really strong. There's a lot of teams that have an opportunity to make a statement. We're planning on being one of them. I don't know how much you took in of like all the extra stuff, but there were a few times that Joey Maguire doubled and tripled down that he expects to be back in Arlington in several months.
That sounds par for the course to me for Joey the offseason and a microphone in his face. I mean, I would only really have a reaction, Rob, if it was like, well, we got a lot of things to work on. We got a lot of positions that are up for grabs, ready for somebody to take the reins. We might still be a year away. That's the only thing that would surprise me. Joey going in there saying, yeah, we'll be back here. We're going to compete at the top. We plan to win the whole damn thing. I feel like I could have formulated that response maybe with a little help from ChatGPT before he ever opened his mouth, Which, say what you want about it, Joey is reliably consistent in that respect.
All right. We're going to Kalani Sitake and Joey Maguire is kind of a combo deal. Joey first in the full coaches roundtable, and then Sitake in a one-on-one forum after the roundtable. Joey says on non-con scheduling, I saw Brian Kelly say he wants to play a Big Ten team. I'd love to play LSU. Home and home series. He goes on to say we gotta get that figured out quickly. It shouldn't be a decade. We get that 2 years in advance on the schedule. Playing SEC teams, playing big teams. And then Sitake said, I agree with the other coaches. I would love to play an ACC team, an SEC team, and a Big Ten team. Line them up. Let's do this. I've told you my plan to save college football. Basically an NFL scheduling style with the Power 4 conferences, top 64 teams, dump 2 out of the Big Ten. Sounds like Sitake and Joey would be on board.
What do you think would be LSU's reaction if Texas Tech called them and said, let's get a home and home on the schedule?
2-3 years ago, I think they'd have the same reaction that Texas had when they left and A&M has had for the last decade. What's the benefit? But I think there would be some interest, especially if you win this year. I think you could certainly garner some interest from an SEC program. You already have Arkansas on the schedule several times. You've played them. You'll play them. Big Ten team Oregon still on the schedule eventually.
Sure.
And then I think Mississippi State's on the schedule too. You think LSU's too above Texas Tech to want to do that?
I think so. I could be wrong. You might very well be right that something has changed, but I know when Texas was in the Big 12 and A&M was in the SEC for a decade, if you talk to any Aggie fan, like they all had the talking points down, they would say there's no benefit to us playing Texas. First off, very confident they would win if that game was played. Yet at the same time, understood that if they lost, it was a bad look. And so their take on it was there's no upside to it. And I don't mean to get us off on a tangent early in the episode here, but I'm in a fantasy football group text with a lot of A&M and Texas fans. Some of them even went to school at one of those two universities.
Some of them.
And they picked an interesting time, and by that I mean today, to kind of do a 180 on their philosophy as it pertains to money in college athletics. Over the last week, they've probably learned the name Cody Campbell, that they probably didn't know that name before. A few days ago, in that same group text, they shared the commitment news about Felix Ojo, the number one tackle in next year's class. And so it's interesting to me that for the last decade, when you're a program like A&M that hasn't won anything outside of a COVID year since about 1998, that the only kind of chest pounding you could do was conference affiliation. And the only reason that really matters is because they were making more money than Texas Tech and everybody else not in the SEC. And so they were able to lord over these other programs with, look at these facilities, look at how much, before NIL, look how much we didn't have to pay this number one ranked recruiting class of all time. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Look at the $84 million in full that we guaranteed to Jimbo Fisher. And look at how much we paid him to go away because he went 8-4 so often. It's just an interesting time to start saying, you know what, there should be a salary cap. There was no hesitation whatsoever on how much money should be in college athletics when they built their stadium out to 110,000 people or secured the wealthiest TV contract in college football history, or when they bought that 2022 recruiting class, or when SEC head coaches made twice as much as everybody else. No hesitation. As soon as a Texas Tech roster starts landing 4 stars, 5 stars, and is getting paid for it, it's like, whoa, hey, time out here. We ought to take a look at money in college athletics. So all that to say, it's an interesting time for the SEC to try to play both sides of, we're automatically better than you because of the conference logo patch that's on our jersey, and you wouldn't stand a chance against us. Even our 7th place team is so elite that they should be in the college football playoff at 8-4. With, well, hang on, your team is getting a little too good, so let's put some rules in place to make sure they can't be so good. But also, again, we're still not going to play you because you're beneath us, and we wouldn't lose under any circumstances, but if we did, it would be a really bad look, and so we're not going to play the game. Until somebody in the Power 2 kind of routinely puts their money where their mouth is, I kind of just think they'll dodge and they'll claim that their really tough 8-game schedule that, like Texas last year included one team that finished the season ranked. They'll claim that that is so superior and more difficult than everything else in college football. So why would you play a program on the rise that's spending a lot in NIL? Because if you're Texas or you're LSU and you lose to Texas Tech, it is a bad look. But if you win that game, it's like, who cares? Because like we've got Georgia next week on the schedule or whatever. So all that's, I don't know if they would play us or not. I love applying some public pressure. Make them say no, make them explain why they won't play Arizona State or Texas Tech or SMU or whoever that's outside the Power 2 in the non-con. So I don't think they would, but I might be wrong. Maybe the calculus has changed in the last couple of years.
LSU plays Clemson, Louisiana Tech. I think LSU played Florida State several years ago. Do you remember that? So
Yes, and I should say LSU played USC last year or year before.
Yeah,
I don't think LSU is the problem.
certainly.
But again, even when the SEC, when you give them some credit for scheduling a tough non-con game, that's still Power 4 game number 9 on their schedule.
Yes.
Whereas when all these other conferences are playing a Power 4 team in the non-con, that's Power 4 game number 10. So I give them some credit that they don't go full, 2 FCS games, one of them in November, plus New Mexico State. They're not quite that bad, but I also am not going to fall all over. Oh, well, they played a 9th Power 14 because that everybody else is already doing that.
All right, let's go to Scott Frost. When asked about what he learned from his failures at Nebraska, he says, "Don't take the wrong job." And Kyle, I think you have this in the mailbag. It sounds bad there, right? But I thought to myself, surely the rest of that quote wasn't as bad. So I went and found it because that's the part that goes viral. He says, "I said I wouldn't leave UCF unless it was someplace you could win a national championship. I got tugged in a direction to try and help my alma mater and didn't really want to do it. It wasn't a good move. I'm lucky to get back to a place where I was a lot happier." Thoughts on zero accountability from Scott Frost on mucking up the Nebraska job. It's just a bad job. Nobody can win there. Not even me. Not even the Golden Boy.
I thought it was terrible. I could if he had been a little more eloquent and said, if he had put the blame 50-50 and said the job isn't quite what I expected, it had challenges that I didn't realize were there. I was happier at UCF. But then he paired that with I also didn't do the best job in XYZ, or if I could do it all over again, I think I could have done better by doing XYZ. Then it would at least be balanced. Say like I screwed part of it up, but also I kind of regret taking the job to begin with. But to take zero account of, like, you're the CEO of the program. They went 3-9 one year. You were there, with top 15, top 20 recruiting classes, and like you don't have any amount of responsibility in that. I think that's a bad sign that, like, to me, that casts doubt on, because if it truly was just the job, the situation, and he didn't win there, I would still think, okay, he's the kind of person that in a better system, better situation, might be able to win. But if he's the kind of person that can't take accountability for anything, even a couple years after the fact, when the lights are on, the microphones in front of your face, and you need to have kind of a polished answer because everybody's going to read what you say, and you can't even if you believe that, you can't massage the PR a little bit and say like, okay, in my head, terrible job, nobody could have won there, but I'm going to say something different so that I don't send the wrong message. But now I just think there were rumors at Nebraska that like he was the last guy in the building, not putting in the work, that he was drunk in Dublin when they lost to Northwestern.
Who would?
So some of that's just Twitter banter. Like I have no clue if that's true or if that's sour grapes from the fan base. But if it's partly true and like he wasn't putting in the effort and then he can't take accountability for his own failures, to me that tells me like UCF doesn't have the right captain of the ship at this moment in time. Which is unfortunate because he found a lot of success there earlier, and you would think, okay, maybe he can flip a switch and do something that kind of mimics that. But if that's kind of his approach and his attitude, it really makes me wonder.
Yeah, I think you and I could come up with, we play the game sometimes, the press conference game where I ask you a question as a coach. I think we could come up with 10 better answers than what he said. And 8 of them probably could run down Nebraska just as well. But you have to take some personal responsibility. And even if you put the emphasis on, man, UCF is just such a better fit for me. It was a bad fit at Nebraska, but I certainly didn't do enough to make the fit correct or whatever it is. I feel a lot better about that than what he said. I'm not impressed with Scott Frost's return, and I don't think they'll be good. Spoiler alert to
No.
where they might be on the Gaucho poll. Excuse me. I got sucked in a gnat. Was it old lady swallowed a fly? We'll go to Matt Campbell in Iowa State on the state of Iowa State's NIL and revenue sharing affecting their roster. Matt Campbell says, I'd say probably our top 20 guys took a pay cut to come back to Iowa State. A lot of these guys had some really good opportunities, end quote. To me, I think I always finish sentences from coaches. A lot of these guys have better opportunities, end quote, start quote, that we flat out can't give them at Iowa State. We are poor. That's what I read from it.
Yeah, it's an interesting message to send because in the world of NIL, like you're obviously competing for talent year round, and I don't know, it's kind of like a company advertising, like if you're Dell and you say, yeah, we pay our employees 20% less than IBM, you're probably gonna lose a lot of prospective employees to IBM. But also, I feel like if you're Iowa State and you don't have the money, it's in some ways better to be honest and upfront about it. And Matt Campbell, to his credit, is a guy who talks about culture and all this stuff. And I think that's in his own way kind of him planting the flag and saying, we're not going to be a program that just tries to outbid everyone. We want the right kind of person, the right kind of character. And I think he's kind of in his own way patting his program on the back for saying we have guys that don't just chase the top dollar because they want to be a Cyclone and they believe in what we're doing here. But to your point, Rob, it's going to be interpreted by prospects, if they're paying attention, as if I want to make money doing this, and I assume they all do, I could earn more if I go to Kansas State instead of Iowa State or whatever. So again, like I don't think it's nearly as egregious as Scott Frost, but it's one of those things like even if it's true or you think it's true in the back of your head, there are things you don't publicize at media days, like that every player in this conference could make more money if they played at any school but yours.
Money, welcome in.
It's pretty bad. I thought it's just really ironic to be in a conference with Texas Tech and see what they've kind of made their recruiting strategy now, which is we will pay you top dollar, and the success that they've had doing that, and then to kind of publicly note that like that's not really your style. And to Iowa State's credit, like I think there's a conversation that they've had more success as a program recently than Texas Tech. And so until the on-field results prove themselves out, sure, I think that model still exists. But I feel like that recruiting model and traditional football programs are going to be one of the first things that die when revenue sharing at this scale really kicks in.
He was also asked about at Iowa State every sport getting a piece of the revenue sharing pie. Because I don't think that's happening at every school. I think you just have to have a certain amount on each side, Title IX wise. It's interesting because Iowa State is going to struggle to get to that 20 million mark, and they're not committing as much to football as other schools, and they don't have the NIL backing. They basically just sell beer and whatever beer they sell. They have 7 of them, and I think the corn vodka or something that they're also selling. But there's this thought process, this mind virus going on college football Twitter that retention is the new recruiting, which was said by several coaches this week, which I agree with. That's awesome. That's an awesome way to view it. I think you have to have retention and recruit and do the transfer portal to be successful in today's college football. There's this like mind virus going on that guys who stay at one school are high character, and by the flip, everyone who transfers ever is low moral fiber and only bag chasing. And it doesn't quite compute with me. I mean, Kyle, if you were presented with an opportunity to do the same job with a better office, is it low character to think about your family's future and earn more money at your job?
I don't think so. I think people prioritize different things in their career at different stages of their career. Quite candidly, I'm in a stage of my career where compensation is very important to me. I would imagine if you're a 21, 22-year-old football player who's not an NFL prospect, the smart way to look at it is like I have 1 or 2 years to capitalize on this, and then I have to find employment on Indeed. And so I don't think it makes you low character to take an opportunity that's only available for a short window before you have to make a living like everybody else. Now, maybe that doesn't really apply if you know you're an NFL lock. But no, again, Matt Campbell has not done this. He has had opportunities to leave, I'm sure, for more money, more prestige, and hasn't. But he's the exception to that rule. Most coaches always leave for the more prestigious, higher-paying job. Some even make lateral moves that they think might be a better fit, like Chris Beard or Lincoln Riley. So, no, I don't think it makes anybody low character.
Did you see the Brock Purdy bit about Matt Campbell and USC?
I saw the headline. I did not go back and read that story yet.
It was a good listen. I think I said it in the Discord and actually added the Gauchos just to kill off the bit. But essentially, like, Brock Purdy's talking about going into that last game of their season, and like pretty much the entire team felt like he was going to leave, and like it had been made pretty apparent that he was going to take the USC job. And then Brock Purdy talks about having this conversation with him about like, you've built a family here, you've built a program here. What you can do at USC, you can do at Iowa State, and you're already doing that. And eventually he comes back and USC hires Lincoln Riley. It's a good clip. Should pull the audio. It's not something we usually do, but be a good listen.
They also were calling him Glock Purdy. I think Trent Williams calls him Glock Purdy. If you wanted to know. Let's go back to Joey Maguire because he talks about the similar, or at least the opposite aspect of what Iowa State was talking about. Joey says it's been a fun offseason. We were really aggressive in the portal. That's an understatement. And Maguire doubled down and said, all of a sudden, a new team is doing it at the highest level. And I do feel like people are a little threatened. Buy or sell, that people are threatened. I'm buying.
I honestly can't tell. You see the comments like, oh, spend all that money just to go 8-4, and like on one hand, I'm like, kind of fair. They've won double-digit games once since Gerald Ford was president. And so I don't think that's an unfair criticism. But on the other hand, are they legitimately worried we're going to win 10 games and either they're coping? Like if I think Baylor went 8-4 last year in the regular season. Same regular season record as Tech. if they had done that and then added our portal class, I would probably be pretty confident Baylor was about to win 10 or 11 games.
I think the conversation we were having just 10 minutes ago about Texas fans and A&M fans, it might be semantics, but I feel like some of that is from a threatened place because they aren't with the influx of Cody Campbell money and Matador Club money, that they aren't so far ahead of us anymore. So if the playing field is even, it doesn't necessarily mean that the teams will be evened quickly, but there is a world where in 5 years, if the money keeps coming and the ability to spend like you were returns or evens out, I think there is a little bit of threatened, but I think more so just in the Big 12 world. I don't know that threatened is the right word, but there were a lot of veiled comments on, there's teams out there just paying a bunch of money, and that's not what we do. Iowa State had a couple, and in the Big 12 roundtable, it felt like 3 or 4 guys were like, I'm not going to say Texas Tech right now, but I'm absolutely talking about what Texas Tech did in the portal, and we can't do that.
I'll say this as well to that point. I remember kind of scoffing at this remark, but before the Washington State game, their head coach, Jake Dickert, was on, like a coach's show or whatever, and was previewing the game a little, and he had some kind of comment like, our teams have a lot of similarities, except we don't have a $5 million roster or something like that. And so it was the exact same jab you're talking about, Rob. It's like, well, these guys are real high paid and we're not. And I remember thinking, like, if we go up there and kick your ass, that just sounds like cope. And then the opposite happened. I think both teams played a really sloppy first half, and then they stomped you pretty bad in the second half. And it is kind of like, okay, you went up there, played a team that you should have more resources than, you should be better than in pretty much every aspect of the game, and they handed it to you. So, like, it's not a good look if you don't follow through with it. I mean, that has been my main criticism of Texas for the last 10 or 15 years. It's like you have every advantage imaginable, and you're losing to 2016 pre-Leipold Kansas. You're getting housed in the Texas Bowl. So yeah, I'm not saying you have to like win the Big 12, make the playoff for any of this to matter. But if you're 8-4 again, same record as last year after adding all these guys, I think that's a fair criticism, and it'll look like you didn't take advantage of a really good opportunity.
I was thinking about that earlier today, and just like, I mean, obviously you had the hype, the Tyler Shuck year, and Wyoming killed that off pretty quickly. But I don't even think that really compared to this. And I don't think we're in the full throttle of how much hype this team will receive before they even get on the field. I was just thinking how bad it would be if we sucked. Like 5-7. Like we don't even make a bowl game. Like it would be the worst thing probably I've experienced as a Tech fan. And that's saying something. It would be terrible if
Yeah,
we sucked.
I kind of
and
feel
I think go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I feel like the 2023 hype train is actually overstated in hindsight. You were like a couple points ahead of TCU in that preseason poll for 4th place, but it was effectively a tie for 4th and 5th. And the way people remember that is that like Tech was picked to win the conference and then shit the bed in Laramie, and it was like, I mean, no, you were picked to be top third ish because that was a 14-team league. Is that right? 14 team league. It was 14 that year because Texas. No, you were still there, but the 4 corners weren't.
You're right. You're right.
So like you were picked to be a top 3 or top third, and then you went 5-4 in conference play. And I don't remember where you finished, but I think it was like 5th or 6th ish. So yeah, I don't know. there not being an official media poll this year, it'll be hard to say whether they overperform or underperform. But what I remember, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure your win total going into 2023 was like 7.5. It wasn't the odds makers saying oh yeah, this is a 10-win team. And I remember thinking that was the one thing that kind of held me back from going all in on, okay, yeah, we're going to make it to the Big 12 championship this year. Now, I didn't think we were going to lose to Wyoming. But, this year I think it's the number's 8.5. And fans are kind of on that, if we go 8-4, it's a disappointment. And the market is saying yeah, you're right on the cusp of 8-4. Markets can be wrong. I don't know what Arizona State's win total was last year. I'm sure it wasn't 9.5 or 10, like they ended up winning. So I don't know. I see some similarities to 2023. I do agree that the hype will be greater. I think the market expectation will probably be a little bit better if you're 8.5 instead of 7.5. But I still don't know. Seeing some of these Big 12 unofficial Big 12 media picks, it's you're not the consensus number one. You're not even really consensus top 2 or 3 in a lot of these. You're being picked 4th to 7th in a lot of them as well. So I'm not sure what to make of the hype and how it compares to 23 and what a realistic expectation is versus what disappointment and all that.
All right, let's rip through some more of these and then get to the Gauchos poll. Dave Aranda talking about Sawyer Robertson. He said, people asked if we can throw deep. I told him Sawyer's arm has its own zip code. We're just waiting on clearance from the FAA. Did Dave Aranda have a joke writer there? Did he have a ghostwriter to put that bar together?
Had to. I mean, Dave Aranda is not a guy you think of like Mr. Personality. But that line sounds like something Lee Corso would have said in like NCAA football 2006.
Yes. Just waiting on FAA clearance. All right. Here's a block quote from Kleiman. He says, on the college football polls, I'd like to see the first polls come out when the CFP poll comes out. This allows for each team to get some games under their belt. That's 7, 8, 9 games at this point. Let's see. This allows each team to get some games under their belt before being ranked. So a team that was supposed to be good doesn't remain in the top 15 after going 1-3. Several coaches talked about Arizona State and BYU being slighted by the national media late in the season and the committee in the playoff because they were expected to be bad by the Big 12 media and then were unranked in the preseason polls. I don't know how much I buy into that, but I do think there is some credence to that. So I understand why the Big 12 voted against doing a media poll. That's why the Big 10 did it. To me, you got to fight through that a little bit. He continued, something we agreed upon that would help our game is not doing the coaches poll. The narrative can really hurt teams. Arizona State could go 4-0 and not be ranked. We need to keep everyone on a level playing field in the revenue sharing era.
So I'd have to agree with that to some extent because Texas and BYU were kind of poster children for this, but in different ways. Texas, when they played Michigan at the Big House, it was a top 15 matchup. Michigan's the defending national champ. It looks like a quality win. Michigan winds up a 6-6 team. Texas plays OU in the Red River Shootout. It's a neutral site game, top 20 matchup. OU goes 6-6, loses to Navy in the bowl game. Texas did that all year. They got to play Vandy when Vandy was top 25, coming off the win over Alabama. And then you fast forward to the end of the year, Texas went 0-2 against Georgia. And until the college football playoff, that was the only team who finished the season ranked that they played. Like A&M, I think, was holding on to top 20 when they played them at the end of the year. A&M was 8-3. They lose that game. They drop out of the rankings. So at the time the games were played, Texas had like 5 ranked wins. And then you go to the end of the year when the polls really matter and they've assessed all the data points and they didn't beat any ranked teams. When BYU beat SMU, nobody gave a shit because everybody just assumed both of these teams suck. And then they finished the year, they're both 10-win teams. And BYU had a better win on its resume on the road against a 10-win team that, came a foot away from winning the ACC championship game against Clemson, and just like nobody cared because they didn't have numbers by their names when the game was played. But if the postseason rankings had been retroactively fitted to that game, it would have been like, number 18 versus number 11 or whatever. And like suddenly that's a big game when it comes to the national landscape and the playoff at-large conversation. So I think there's some truth to it. I think there's obviously when you preseason rank, 12 SEC teams and then they all go 500 against each other, then they get a ton of credit for quality losses that don't actually exist. And the Big 12 gets the exact opposite effects. Like you can play Arizona State and Lubbock and beat them when they're unranked, and then fast forward to the end of the year, Arizona State's a top 10 or 12 team. And Texas Tech didn't get credit in that game for beating a top 10 or 12 team, obviously, because it was played in late September. But then you look back at the end of the year and you're like, yeah, they beat Iowa State on the road. They beat Arizona State. Those are quality wins. Not that Texas Tech was in the at-large picture or anything. But ultimately, yes, I do think that preseason rankings do quite a bit of damage to reality, and it entrenches a narrative way too early in the season that always winds up being pretty inaccurate.
I do think the AP and the playoff poll should be the first poll, and it should be maybe a little earlier than it has been, week 7, 8. I'd be fine with. Let's get some
I'm cool with after week 4, everybody's played their non-conference slate and their first conference game. Do it October 1st or whatever. Somewhere around there.
Yeah. Timlock says, Kyle, I thought this was a family show. I didn't even notice you said anything inappropriate.
Me neither. My bad.
You say the A word? All right. I've got one last.
I might have dropped an S-bomb now that I think about it.
I've got one last day one quote, and then I'm going to run through the day 2 quotes. It's less, I don't know, it just was kind of a less exciting day to me. Kenny Dillingham tripled down at this point, saying if you don't think Texas Tech has the talent to win the Big 12, you're delusional. Is it delusional to say Texas Tech's not a top 3 team in the Big 12?
According to Bud Elliott, no.
We'll get told, Bud. All right, I'm going to read these. You interject if you want to say something. So I'll pause after the quote and let you guys respond if you want to. Colorado's Deion Sanders on Texas Tech's offseason. Joey got some money, spending some money. Then on the transfer portal, he said, it's cool when they do it, but it's a problem when I do it. Ain't that a rap song? Can you send a few of those dollars my way so we can get some of those players?
I wish the Cowboys hired him so bad.
I don't. I'm very intrigued on Colorado. I think
They definitely do not have a ping pong table in their locker room. They're not going out and playing paintball.
Well, he hasn't been there all summer with health issues. Some guy from The Athletic asked him a question, and he was like, The Athletic, y'all be on that bull junk. I'm not telling you much. It's like, okay, dude. All right. Houston's Willie Fritz on building relationships in the new college football era. It's more like a microwave than an oven. I thought that was a good line. Arizona's Brent Brennan on if you had any doubts whether Noah Fafita would return in 25. I think people were so pissed about how the season went, and they were just trying to recreate any kind of drama they could to make it look messy. I told the players, if you don't want to be here, then leave. Just go. Because we're going to build this program with guys that are tough, love football, and want to be here. Noah checks all those boxes. He was also asked about Arizona's struggles in year 1. He says, I think we spent the first 6 months on the job kissing everyone's ass, asking them to stay. So Brent Brennan with a little 2-piece spicy answering on some of the struggles he's had. He moved the needle at all for you? It almost felt like I got to go out there and make a show because nobody thinks I can do this.
Brent Brennan?
Yeah.
No, that dude is toast.
Yeah. Oh, I agree.
That was terrible football last year with a very, very good NFL talent and a decent quarterback. They had 37 transfer outs this offseason.
Yeah.
With an average grade of 66. And they had 28 come in with an average of 66.18.
Did you see the total number of new players on the UCF roster? If you're looking at it, just guess. Just guess how many new players UCF has on their roster, according to, I believe, Scott Frost.
I'm looking at it on three right now, so this is going to be a Kyle question.
Kyle?
Is he with us?
42.
69.
Oh my gosh.
Kyle, I feel like there's a delay here with you. Will you leave and come back?
I was wondering if that was him or me.
Okay. One more set of quotes, and it's from the big boy, Mike Gundy. They obviously asked him about him being in the game, in the college football game. Have you seen his hair?
It's amazing.
It's hilarious. He says, I've not played the game, but I think it's pretty cool that somebody put me in a video game. Somebody showed me the picture just recently, and they gave me a hairdo. I have really good hair. I mean, it's permanent hair forever, but I'm good with it. I wish my royalties were as much as the players were getting, but it should be fun.
Did you see the clip of when that quote was actually taken from?
Well, I think that was from the press conference. I did see the behind the scenes thing where they're actually showing him the photo.
Yeah. He's just staring down at it, just smiling ear to ear. He thinks it's the coolest thing he's ever seen.
That's me for sure. And then Gundy also talked about the 5+11 college football playoff model. And he gave 3 paragraphs on the transcript about it, but I pulled one little sentence. He says, I like the Big 12 conference. I like the future of this league. And I put my name behind the agreement of the 5+11 model. And that's the way it should be. If you play well, you deserve it. You earn it. You get in. If you don't, you try again next year. And then he said, I would tell that to Oklahoma State if we struggled. I would tell that to anybody in the Big 12 if they struggled, that just to get back on your horse and try again next year. So that's the Big 12 media quotes. Let's move on. How do you want to do this? I've got my poll ready. Money, you missed the first couple of minutes. We're going to come together to put our ballot forth for the Big 12 media preseason. Do you just want to start with the bottom 5 and come up with the bottom 5 and then move on from there?
Sure.
Kyle, is that a bit that you're doing that now, or are you
No, I was trolling that
okay
time. I think.
Yeah.
You told me.
You should have thrown your voice for a couple of seconds. Oh, and now he freezes. Oh, there. No, he's back. Okay. Let's do this. I'll give you my 5, bottom 5. Then if we agree or disagree, we can go from there. Starting at 16, Arizona, UCF, Houston, Oklahoma State, Cincinnati. Arizona, UCF, Houston, Oklahoma State, Cincinnati. That's my bottom 5. And I don't really feel good about it, actually.
I would move West Virginia into the bottom 5 and Oklahoma State out. And I would probably put Arizona above UCF.
Money, who's your 16?
Top to bottom?
No, just your 16 period. Would you go UCF or Arizona?
Arizona.
Okay. Majority rules.
I can't believe, of all people, I somehow have more faith in Brent Brennan than other people. Like, I'm not really a Brent Brennan guy.
No, you
as you all
haven't.
know.
You were an early adopter on Brent Brennan was going to be a bum. Are
Day
we cool
one.
with? Are we cool with Houston at 14?
I'm gonna show up next week in a luau.
Lay?
Or in LA, yeah.
Yeah.
That feels low.
I'm putting Houston higher than that.
But you were moving Oklahoma State up, and so is West Virginia 14? I'm open to moving
West Virginia is worse than Houston. Yeah.
Okay. Cincinnati, worse than Oklahoma State and Houston?
Worse than Houston, yes.
They got Sorsby back, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Worse than Houston, better than Oklahoma State.
So Oklahoma State 14. That's what I'm hearing.
Oh, we still haven't ranked UCF, have we? Or are they locked in at 15?
I just put them 15, yes.
Okay.
Sorry, 13. So currently I've got Arizona 16, UCF 15, West Virginia 14, Oklahoma State 13.
I like it.
Capiche? That would put Houston 12, Cincinnati 11. But are y'all flipping that? Because I'm open to.
I'll put Houston above Cincinnati. That's my vote.
And then Colorado would also come into play here. You're moving Colorado down or keeping them at 10?
I'm not moving Colorado below Houston or Cincinnati.
Okay. Money, how would you put Cincinnati and Houston? Who would you put on top?
Connor Weigman or Brendan Sorsby? Give me Sorsby.
Okay. I agree. All right. To me, the Big 12 is split into two tiers. And you could probably find some more minutia here in the top kind of tier as like a true breakout. But I think it's the top 9 and everyone else. Would you agree that would be the kind of the main first break of contender and non-contender?
Yes.
So you still have BYU as a top 9 instead of a bottom 8.
Kind of forgot about their quarterback situation. I'm probably putting them 9 or 10, yeah.
I've got them 9 currently. Would you go Colorado or BYU? Higher. I feel like we're playing Card Shark.
I think I'll put BYU higher.
Okay. So the bottom 8 from the bottom: Arizona, UCF, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, Houston, Cincinnati, Colorado, BYU.
Sure.
Locking in? Locking that in. Now, I'm going to give you my top 8, and I feel like there's going to be some issues here from the two of you. We'll see. Maybe you just agree and we move on. Kansas, number 8. Kansas State, number 7.
Oof.
TCU 6. Iowa State 5. Utah 4. Baylor 3. Arizona State 2. Texas Tech 1. Big movers there. Would you move one up way higher, way lower? Or do you want to go one by one here?
For me, it's easier to work from the top down.
Okay.
And we have a pretty big disagreement here. My preseason number 1 is Kansas State. Number 2 is Texas Tech. Number 3, Baylor. Number 4, Utah. Number 5, Arizona State. Number 6, TCU. Number 7, Iowa State. And I'll agree with you on Kansas because they were tale of two halves of the season last year. So I'm not sure what to make of them. And Jalen Daniels could always get hurt.
All right. Money, you good with Kansas at 8? We're locking that in?
Yeah. I would argue TCU there, but majority wins.
Okay, then I'm open to having TCU at 7. Kyle, would you agree with that?
I would. Yeah, I would flip Iowa State and TCU.
And then I can agree to have Iowa State at the next one there, which I would have them moving down there. But I'm open to moving Kansas State up. I don't know that I'm open to them being number 1. We'll get there when we get there, though. Because if you both rank it, then I'll accept it. So Iowa State 6, TCU 7, Kansas 8. Locking that in?
That's good with me.
Okay. Money, where do you have Kansas State? Let's go with that direction.
3.
Where?
3.
Okay. Where do you have Texas? Can you just give me your top 5 in order?
Texas Tech 1. Arizona State 2. Kansas State 3. Baylor 4. Iowa State 5.
So you have Utah even lower.
Yeah, I have them at 6.
And Kyle, where was your Utah?
I had them at 4. But to me, honestly, 2 through about 5 are pretty fluid. Yeah. Honestly, 1 through 5 to some extent kind of fluid. So I'm okay moving people up a spot or 2 or down a spot or 2 in this range.
Okay, so I am open to Utah at 5. And I'm open to – how does this sound to everyone? We'll be the homers. We'll say Texas Tech 1. Since you both have Kansas State higher than me, I'm open to Kansas State, Baylor in any order at 2, 3, and Arizona State at 4.
Yeah, that sounds okay to me. I think our biggest difference is Kansas State. The rest, I think, we're within a spot or 2, and I think pretty much on the same page.
I think just for fun, we put Baylor at 2 because you don't play them, and it would be more fun. Sorry. It would be more fun to play Baylor in the Big 12 championship than a repeat of Kansas State. So speak now, forever hold your peace. Texas Tech, Baylor, Kansas State, Arizona State, Utah, top 5. Wonderful. All right, any other comments, concerns before we move on? We've not talked since the FIBA championship.
Real quick before we pivot to basketball.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk through Kansas? What?
Talk through what?
I didn't hear what you said.
No, what were you saying? I interrupted. I was rude.
Right, that's why I couldn't understand what you were saying because I was. So I had Kansas State at 1. You had them at 7. Do you want to talk through that? That's a pretty big gap.
Yeah, I think it comes down to me. 1 through 8, you could flip coins, in my opinion. And I think Sam Leavitt is the best quarterback in the Big 12. I think Sawyer Robertson is one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12. So I put them higher. And I just don't trust Avery Johnson. I've got Matt Wells syndrome. He's the new offensive coordinator calling plays. They got some nice pieces out of the portal. I think their running back, Dylan Edwards, is one of the best in the conference because it's kind of light on returners. And then I would say their receiver, Brown, is one of the most electric in the conference. So I'm open to Kansas State being ranked higher. Personal choice, if it comes down to having to throw the football at the quarterback position, I don't think Avery Johnson is going to be successful at that. If it comes down to not kick a field goal on second down late in the game situation, I don't know that Matt Wells will be capable of not doing that either. So I'm intrigued to see if Matt Wells can turn Avery Johnson into Jordan Love, but I just don't see that happening.
So when Avery Johnson arrived in the Big 12 2 years ago, scale of 1 to 100, how much hype was there surrounding him?
Quite a bit. Best prospect in Kansas. The highlight tapes were crazy. And obviously with his first action on the field, being a 5 rushing touchdown day in extended action, that's a pretty big highlight as well from Avery Johnson.
So we're both, I think our reasoning is heavily influenced by Avery Johnson, but for different reasons. I still think he's a player with a lot of room to grow. And if he even like halfway in between where he was as a player last year and the hype that surrounded him when he came in, if he meets that halfway and you combine that with what I think Kleiman has demonstrated as a really, really high ceiling for that program, like they're pretty much an 8.5 win team no matter what. And then if he does develop into a really dynamic dual threat quarterback, it's hard for me to see them losing 3 conference games. You know, they have Texas Tech's number. We have to go play them there. And so I think there's a world, if we're guessing like the highest upside here, because there is a ton of parity, like who has a better chance to make a huge leap first last year, Avery Johnson or Josh Hoover? Avery Johnson or Sawyer Robertson the last half of the season? Avery Johnson or Baron Morton? Avery Johnson or Sam Levitt for that matter? Like, I think he is further, what he's put on the field already is further from his ceiling than any of the other quarterbacks that are playing for Big 12 contenders. And if he makes that leap, I think it's hard to say that they're not going to make it to Arlington. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he never gets close to that hype, and maybe last year was roughly his ceiling, and we get a duplicate of that. I don't think he was bad last year. But anyway, that's kind of my, if I'm going for upside and trying to pick a number 1 team, I think they might have more than a lot of people are talking about right now, and a lot of it does hinge on Avery Johnson.
Yeah, I'm a hater.
He's got an offensive weapon, Jerron Bradley, there now.
Yeah, he's wide receiver 2 down there. Yeah, I don't want Kansas State to be good. That's maybe what it is. So I'm just kind of willing it into existence that they might be 7th instead. But yeah, if you're like taking your hard-earned cash and trying to bet on somebody, would you bet for the first time ever Texas Tech does it, or that Kansas State is back in contention? I think probably the safer bet is Kansas State.
So I've got Avery Johnson's game logs from last year pulled up. He had 2 games. Who was this against? 5-point loss at Houston. That's bad. And a 10-point loss against Arizona State, where his quarterback rating was just over 100. Besides that, he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games in a row, 7 out of the last 9 where it was 131 or higher. 2,700 yards, 25 touchdowns, 10 INTs, ran for 605 yards. Like, what if there's even just marginal improvement? If he throws for 3,200 yards, 32 touchdowns instead of 25, and 7 picks instead of 10, and they let him run the ball 150 times instead of 100, I don't know. I could see a world where he's viewed as more dynamic than Sawyer Robertson and Sam Levitt. And again, I just think really highly of Kleiman as a coach. They seem to rarely do worse than about 9 wins. So that's kind of where my head is at.
Yeah, I as you noticed, did not have much resistance on moving Kansas State up much further. You had Arizona State a little further down, I think, than I did. That's the other one. Do you similar to BYU? I think BYU has they got so there's a KenPom analytic luck. I feel like if there's some kind of metric for luck in football, BYU had the highest in the country last year. They got so many turnovers and big breaks on special teams and otherwise. And I think Arizona State some of the same things there. And then you just kind of look at schedules. Utah gets to play their big teams at home. It feels like Kansas State, I think, has a schedule that lines up. And Texas Tech plays both those teams on the road. But why do you think Arizona State can't replicate some of their success from last year?
I think they could. I just think it's hard to do. And I think Cam Scadaboo was such a good player at such a high volume that I know they still have Levitt and Tyson, but that is not as easy as handing the ball to Scadaboo 25 times and having him catch 5 or 10 out of the backfield, which is what they did in a lot of games. And very rarely do you see one player kind of carry his team like that. So it's not to say they can't do it without him, but like if a team kind of schemes, they double cover Tyson really well, they scheme against it better, and they don't have just an absolute beast as a backup plan. I don't know. I'm not saying they can't, or that I'm not a believer in what they did last year, but that's just a major and very high volume piece to replace. I mean that Peach Bowl against Texas, they had Scadaboo. It's like that scene from Friday Night Lights when Boobie Miles throws that pass, and his uncle says, "Oh, and he can pass." That's what they're doing with Scadaboo. It's like he's running the ball. They're throwing him wheel routes. He's throwing the ball on double passes. So I think Sam Levitt is a good player. I think Jordan Tyson is a really good player. Both, I think, likely to be NFL draft picks, especially Tyson. But that's a major piece to remove from that offense. They also won a lot of close games, which is sometimes the mark of a good team. Sometimes it's the mark of being due for a little bit of regression. So I don't think they're going to be a bad team, or like with a huge fall off or anything. But they got in last year on a tiebreaker. They were a top 3 or 4 team, and I don't think it's out of the realm to say they're going to be slightly worse than that without Cam Scadaboo.
Cam Scadaboo excelled last year and was on the All Big 12 team, I think, because of his receiving. Obviously, the rushing was great, but so was RJ Harvey, so was Taj Brooks, so was you name it in the Big 12 last year. I think he really set himself apart catching the football. I believe his name is Kanye Ude out of Army. Ran for 1,000 yards at Army last year, but I think he caught 2 passes. And then the kid's name is escaping me. Brown, maybe, at the running back position, which is the second Brown that I've mentioned, but I believe that's his name. He might be a guy that can catch the ball out of the backfield, but that is a pretty big piece to the offense that potentially they could be missing with Scadaboo. I think they can run the ball without Scadaboo. I don't know that Sam Levitt has his safety blanket, and that could affect him and the offense for sure.
I mean, he had 350 touches last year.
Yeah.
And 2,300 scrimmage yards. Like, they have a stud running back who is half as productive as Scadaboo. Like, if they have a 1,000-yard rusher who catches 200 yards out of the backfield, he'll be half as productive as Scadaboo and still a good, productive player. So that's my only worry is they didn't lose, especially like a bell cow running back is such a high volume of production. Like, even when you lose a good receiver who may have had 8 touches a game, like, well, you've still got 80 other offensive snaps per game. When you lose a Cam Scadaboo who's that good at rushing and catching out of the backfield, to me, that's just a lot. And so I'm not super confident that they can adequately replace that much production.
You've kind of talked me into maybe putting Arizona State even further down. Utah has 2 first-round NFL draft picks on their offensive line. I think if their defense replicates what they did last year, Beck and Dampier come in as an offensive coordinator and quarterback, both from New Mexico. I think they got a Washington State running back. There was a 1,000-yard rusher last year at Washington State. I'd have to double-check that. I think Arizona got Ismail Mahdi from Texas State. I think the Washington State kid went to Utah. Man, if their defense replicates 22, 23, 24 points a game, and the offense can just score like another 5 points a game, they could really improve. Are you buying into
Cam
Utah?
Scadaboo, real quick, Cam Scadaboo, 143 yards rushing, just rushing or more in 7 of their last 9 games.
The one game he
And
didn't.
then that wasn't in the last 9 games, but yes, we kind of held him in check, except he had 6 catches for 117 yards against us.
That wasn't in the last 9 games? Oh, because we played
them
championship and
that was the first conference game of the season.
That's right. They had 2 games after the season. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dang.
He was a beast. Okay, anyway.
You buying into Utah at all?
Yeah.
Would you flip Arizona State and Utah? Or do you like how we have it?
To me, like, honestly, there's so much like 1 through 6 to me is I wouldn't really argue with you.
Yeah.
I think TCU and Kansas are like maybe just a slight rung below that. I don't see them being as likely as like a Utah to compete for the top spot, but I don't think they're bad either. So I really wouldn't argue with anybody that had somebody 3, somebody else 5, or whatever.
All right. Let's leave it where it is. Final thoughts on the Big 12 preseason poll. And Kyle, do you want to tell everyone that the Big 12 poll will be released at some point?
Yeah, can we do it tomorrow?
I'm in. I think we had at least 2 more additions today. So I think we've got enough to put it forth. I think we have 20-ish submissions.
I can actually compile it right now and give our picadors a sneak peek.
It might change.
I don't mean like right now in the next few seconds, but like during. Yeah.
Right. I think it might be a little different. Here, let me ask Money about FIBA, and then we'll get back to that. How does that sound?
Yep.
Money, How about that FIBA? Huh? No, we haven't talked about it since it ended. How I've tried to answer this question a couple times on air on 100.7 The Score, Into the Bench, 9 to noon weekdays. And I think I was technically on the bottom line Monday when we really went through it, but I was on it. Anyways, how important is it for Texas Tech to have a player and a coach in the finals, player playing well, coach getting credit for that team winning, at least some, not like all the credit, they have really good players, but at least being mentioned in an international forum that is highly thought of in the basketball world?
For Grant, I'm not sure the off the court stuff matters as much. I think he's a well-respected guy in the college basketball coaching world, which I think really says a lot because this is his first high major job. But he's had that respect for a while, and rightfully so because of the success he's had at all his stops. I think on the court it gives a really interesting angle, particularly this year, with two of the best incoming players in the Big 12 and AJ Divansa to BYU and Koa Pete to Arizona. He practiced extensively with those guys, watched Tommy Lloyd, another interesting angle with Koa Pete there, kind of draw up plays for him, see him getting him into actions, kind of thinking, oh, yeah, I might be able to keep some of this in my back pocket from when we play you. With the Banta, I'm not sure it will matter. That guy's a freak, and BYU is going to be really, really good. But I think that level of exposure is probably helpful. And, there are eyeballs on you at that tournament, but I think for him, the respect he's earned thus far has been plenty. For Anderson, I think it's much more significant off the court. I don't think it actually means a lot Texas Tech-wise, other than they were mentioned a lot by some guy calling the game in his mom's basement and wearing wired Apple headphones while doing so. But in terms of for him individually and personally, that game gets a lot of NBA eyeballs. I don't think a lot of people recognize, especially when you're at this age. And he was getting a lot of love because of what he did at this tournament, and rightfully so. Really, really impressive to watch. And so for him, I think it's huge, and I think it solidifies kind of what we needed to see from him. He has been your assumed point guard one for this entire offseason, and I think, it'd be fair to look back at what he did last year and think, this guy's an elite player, but is he the guy that's going to run our offense? And what he did and how he did it in Switzerland answered a lot of those questions. And I want to get into more of what he actually did. But obviously the playmaking was the biggest improvement. And so if we'll play a little game here, he played 7 games in the World Cup and had 69 assists. How many assists do you think he had all of last season?
I'm going to take the under on 69 just because you framed it in a way. I might take the way under and go like 51.
Kyle, you have a guess?
Exactly the same.
Nice.
So it was not under what he did all of last season. It was over, but it was 77. So he was 8 assists shy of matching his assist total from all of last year in 28 fewer games and about 800 fewer minutes.
Wow. That is impressive. And feels like it should be surprising, but it really isn't. Second most in the World Cup.
Hmm.
And then he averaged 17 points a game, 18 points a game, 17, 18, whatever it was.
Yeah, 17.3.
Where did that rank among scorers? That was top 10, right?
I want to say so. I mean, he made the first team essentially. See if I can pull up
Yeah, that was awesome.
leaders. Yeah, so he was 10th in points per game.
And that was, I think, 5 of the 7 games were more than double digits. 2 of them under double digits. I don't know. I do think, correct me if I'm wrong, I do think there were still some turnover issues. Some of that his doing, most of it, I think he was pressing a little bit, and there were a few crispy, incredible passes that just flat out didn't work because they were booted by his big men or his guards. So I do think if you're like really studying box scores from FIBA and you're saying, yeah, he's got 6 turnovers and 5 turnovers and 3 turnovers, it's like, well, I don't know how many of those you're getting if you're a well-oiled Big 12 machine that's played more than 5, 3, 2 games together.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting aspect of this because, I mean, you look at the raw numbers, 27 turnovers in 7 games, that's about 4 per game. That number on the surface looks concerning. You don't want your guy averaging 4 turnovers a game. You watch the games, and I have no concerns about it. And in fact, I almost wish he committed more turnovers.
Yeah.
Probably wouldn't want that if he was playing for Texas Tech. But the reason I even say that is because, yes, there were dropped passes like you mentioned, Rob. There were fumbles. There were Federico hands down there at times. But he would also make a couple of passes that were intercepted or deflected or the defender just saw. But you could see the playmaking vision. You could see the process and you could see him reading the floor and saying, that's a read. And yeah, eventually as you get more seasoned as a ball handler, you want to be able to see, oh yeah, that's the read, and then this is the issue. This is the potential defender that I need to look out for. This is my blind spot. This is where I need to be reading the defense. But for him going from the player that he was last year, which was a pure scorer, and he could run some pick and roll with JT Toppin, but he never really showed anything flashy like what Elijah Hawkins was doing running their offense. But what he did in this tournament was showcase some of that flashiness. He was processing the game as a point guard, and he was really seeing the floor from the perspective of, oh yeah, this is how I get my teammates involved. And that was really, really encouraging. Because again, even it just wasn't there a lot on film last year. And maybe it's because you had such an elite guy doing that already. But I mean, every time I watch Christian Anderson, the biggest takeaway I have is this guy just looks so much more experienced than he really is. He plays like a veteran player. You can tell how quickly he picks up on coaching. Like he even had a play in the World Cup where he just jumped up and deflected a pass in the passing lanes. And it's like, yeah, that's Grant McCaslin on defense. Like intercept the passing lanes, have disruptive hands. He's just such a player that punches way above his weight in terms of his intangibles and his processing ability. And that's so valuable as a playmaker.
DeBansa physically looks the part in the Big 12. He certainly could hit a Big 12 freshman wall. You look back at, like, I don't know, Andrew Wiggins. But those freshman walls, it's like maybe he's going 21-12 in the non-con, and then he's like, all right, my freshman wall is 16-8 in Big 12 play. So I think DeBansa is everything he was advertised to be. I thought Koa Pete was much more effective. And again, this is just barely, I'm not like charting anything. It's just barely kind of paying attention to these games. Especially on Team USA. I watched much closer on Germany just because of Christian Andersen, but it felt like Koa Pete was much more effective in the first game. Maybe first 2 games. He was certainly effective in the tournament. But it was obviously the DeBances show. And that Perez Johnson going to Duke. Duke? Was Johnson going to Duke? Yeah. He looks decent.
Mikel Brown looked really good.
He was really good. And then
He should have won MVP.
I think JJ Mandequit and Hans Steinbach are quite the duo going to Washington. I think they could be a team that makes a noise in the Big Ten. I don't know the rest of their roster, but those 2 guys certainly look like they could be a combo together.
Yeah, that guy rules.
Yeah, Steinbach was awesome. He's so nice around the rim.
You ever just watch a basketball player and you're like, my dad would love this guy.
Yes, yeah. He plays the
And
right
you're like
Yeah.
the Kevin Love of the FIBA U19 German team.
Yeah. All right. Final thoughts on FIBA?
I think he's going to be really good, man. I'm having a hard time talking myself out of it. I think, obviously, college basketball teams are now average age of like 23 years old. And so you have to factor that into this equation and just the talent of the Big 12 in general. But, man, even production is one thing, but the visuals and how he looked doing it was really, really encouraging.
Yeah. All right. Now's as good a time as any to, boom, say goodbye to our YouTube audience. Say goodbye to our Dave Campbell's Texas football audience. If you want the preview of the Gauchos poll, actually, it'll probably be out by the time this episode releases anyway, so forget about that. If you want the mailbag, join us on Patreon, patreon.com/gamblingGauchos. We'll certainly get more into Big 12 Media Days, and there's some mailbag questions. We'll talk about the hockey guy on the golf course. Bang! 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 We'll also talk through some other things in the mailbag, but we leave you here. Kyle, do you want to say anything to the YouTube and Dave Campbell's audience before we kick them out?
Love y'all.